All right, hello and good morning, DBI. I am your DBI admin, Riz, and this is going to be a early morning roleplay review / reading of the Breaker Falls reunion. I've read through most of this log. I saw some of it live, and I read through most of it throughout my time trying to get caught up on the forums. And every time I did, I always had a different feeling and opinion about it at different points. So I decided that we are going to read this together, even though it's kind of long to be read on page. Excuse me. And then we're just going to jump right into the review right afterwards. As always, thank you for checking out the content, and I hope you guys enjoy this one. So, this is the Breaker Falls reunion. And the characters involved in this one are Fusion, Genesis, and Koshoro. The type is a recovery / dialogue, and the arc that it belongs to is the tiger, the wolf, and the bear. Now, the brief synopsis is going to be that Koshoro and the Tiger Lilies discover the ruined bodies of Genesis, Yugen, and Fusion following their battles and skirmishes, and they bring them back to their camp near Breaker Falls. Now, before we get into this, I do believe that this log falls after the wolf and the bear. The wolf and the bear. So this is after the fight between between Yugen and Fusion, if memory serves. So, without further ado, we're going to lubricate the vocal cords and jump right into this one. And it opens up, I'm over here, there we go, with Koshoro. The Tiger Lilies had all traveled to be near the fight between Genesis and Nova. Kosho had insisted it would be a spectacle of the year, but not too close. By the time the smoke cleared and the winds of the Z Mountains had blown them away, it still took hours to hike down and find their way to the area where an area where those blazed and burned by the flame snouts had been intended to be treated. Kosho had gone off on his own to help retrieve the body of Genesis. What they had found was a massacred tent site and a hot spring with corpses and blood strewn everywhere. They had also found Yugen and one other survivor of whatever had happened here. They assumed it had been a dino attack. The creatures in the sanctuary had been unusually aggressive as of late. Perhaps so many new and unfamiliar people visiting had upset them, but there were rumors that something else was at play. There was no time to unravel those mysteries, however. Yugen, Genesis, and the wolf were all brought to the Tiger Lilies camps near Breaker Falls. With Spina gone, it was up to them to tend to the wounds of these mortal men and try to nurse them back to consciousness. His expertise was never more heartbreaking and lacking than at this moment. So yes, this does take place after the events of the Wolf and the Bear, excuse me, where Yugen and Fusion had their fight. It would not actually be all that long before Genesis stirred. Though he had taken a truly epic pounding at the hands of the mighty Nova, he still possessed an incredible constitution and plenty of sheer grit. He slowly opened his eyes and groaned, finding himself in a wholly unfamiliar, though not inhospitable, surroundings. Too bleary to reach to the sense of key signatures or focus on sounds, though, he started instead to slowly push himself upright. Having fallen into a deep, unconscious dream, the wolf felt caged inside of his own body. Shattered memories and broken pieces of the past faintly revealed themselves. The visage of a rough straw house with strewn oddities all around it inside. The appearance of an old mid-50s man carrying half logs from a nearby forest that surrounds it. What is this? Fusion could only wonder, having no recollection of what all of this means to him. Before anything made sense, the world opened before him, and all he could feel was pain numbing his body. He could not move, nor could he see anything with his eyes facing the sky. He can only groggily blink as he awakened. It was not the beast inside, but the remains of a man that locked up parts of himself to better prepare for what he set out to do. Genesis would feel a slender human hand trying to gently ease him backward from his upright position. When his disorientation subsided, he might see through perhaps a welted, blackened eye the figure of a young woman near his bedside in the hot tent. Brown hair, tanned skin, black eyes. She wore an orange and black fighting gi with a white sash and shin wraps. She would smile down at him. Shh. Don't move too quickly. You're really hurt. You need to be patient and heal. I'll catch you up on where you are. And then she began to explain how they had found and moved him to a safe place that had been tending his wounds in a calm bedside manner. Outside the tent, Kosho was dabbing cloth into an ice bucket he had been wiping Fusion's head with, and went through some night as he went through some night terrors, and he had been mumbling in his sleep. As the man's eyes began to flicker, however, he knelt down quietly by his cot in the open air near the fire. Hey, welcome back. Don't be afraid. We're just helping. We found you injured. The body of Yugen lay on the opposite side of the fire from Fusion. Still comatose, Yonda was treating him. Too far. So he wasn't dead, but he was being taken care of. This is more than he expected for what he had done here. Are they not aware of who he is? Could he take this lack of knowledge and use it to his advantage? There are far too many variables that are unclear to Fusion. At the least, he could pose some questions to them. Where am I? Who are you? He inquired, believing that the simplest questions are the best to start off with. His memory of the previous two fights is groggy. He had almost lost himself to instinct then. Genesis had pushed himself up partway to a sitting position. He grunted as he felt a twinge of unusual pain, and he raised his right hand, turning it over. It had been bandaged, but he could feel where his own attack clashing with Nova's had left a burn that felt deep enough to leave another scar. He looked down at it for a short time, then up at his benefactor. I know how to rest, but I appreciate it anyway. Damn. Don't suppose you found Nova passed out a few feet away from me? He smirked, mostly at himself. Suppose that'd be too much to ask. Damn. It was a fantastic fight. We watched it from the peaks. In the most honorable way she could muster, Tamayo let Genesis know that he had lost his duel and his Dragon Balls. Kojaru is making a meal for everyone right now. You can sit here and rest as long as you like. You really are injured and shouldn't be moving around, but I understand if you need to stretch your legs and just take in the night air. This is the Tiger Lily camp. We're near Breaker Falls, if you're familiar with the sanctuary. We're a small dojo, but we're trying our best for everyone here. Welcome. I think you're friends with Kosho? Or something like that? He's outside if you want to meet with him. And she bowed. I'm Kosho Byako, a member of the EDF, the Earth Defense Force, if you're not a native. This is our campsite, our dojo, as you might say, here in the sanctuary. My friends and I have been working really hard to make it a beautiful space. You're welcome here. We'll have food soon. Do you need anything? Water, clothes, food? I'm not sure what happened to you, I'm afraid. We just found you and just wanted to help out where we could. Kosho Byako. he shall remember that name. He hasn't had to run in. He hasn't had a run-in with the EDF though, so he can't say for certain whether they would have any bounty on him or anything of the sort. It seems like they're both unaware of another's. It seems like they're both unaware of each other's intentions. Here they are, talking to one another, even though they should be fighting a death battle. How long will that irony last, though? All three. I could use all three. He had been starving, and he hadn't had water in a while, and in his current apparel was completely destroyed. Bandaging was all that remained. My name, he feigns knowing. I'm struggling to remember. Genesis shrugged. Had no need for the Dragon Balls, but the duel, now that was worth it. He pushed himself up with a groan and then to his feet, steadied himself with hands on knees before slowly straightening. He looked down, seeing that he was still wearing the same name-printed boxer's trunks, and grinned slightly. Then he had given another slight groan as he worked his arms, feeling the places that pulled or were hurt. Or, saving time, he tallied up the ones that weren't sore and came up blank. Kosho's here? He perked up noticeably. Well, damn, that's some luck. Meant to look him up before I left Earth. He gave Tamayo a friendly grin. Let's go find him. Come on. And yes, I'm purposely giving Genesis an accent. Hey, Gojaro, how's that stew coming? Near the fire was a large, bald man with an impressive mustache who was chopping onions and leeks furiously on a punch-out cutting board and adding them to an iron cauldron over the fire. I only say that because I'm allergic to onions. Coming up, Coco. I know I have some extra stomachs to feed, so I'm using what's left of our stores. Kosho raised an arm and gave him a thumbs up. Sounds great. Kosho looked to Kojaro and grinned back at Fusen, then nodded. Grab some clothes for you and some water. Just stay here. You're really hurt. You need to rest. Stand up and walk around if you think you can. Be careful. I'm just going to pause here and do a slight sidebar. It's kind of funny, for the amount of damage and injuries that these people have sustained, they need to be in a hospital. But instead, they're camping outside with like some makeshift, like I can only imagine like somebody's like half burned and they just have like some leaves with some salve on their face, right? And they're like all bandaged up. Things are getting infected, and it's like, oh yeah, I need some stew. Now, I mean, it's anime and it's roleplay, so it's not that serious. But you know, reading through this the first time, I was just like, nah, these people need doctors. So, anyway, let's continue on. Tamayo was kind of smitten by this Namekian and his forward way. She stood up with him and took his hand to help him out of the cot and began to exit into the night with him. Began to exit into the night with him to find their mutual friend. It was a cool summer night. The trees surrounding the campsite were pines, and their needle scent filled the air. A small drift of snow was always falling here. In the distance was the roar of Breaker Falls. Their campsite was made up of 3 capsule houses with a central fireplace in the center. There was an obvious ring where they sparred each other, invisible footpaths where training had taken place and had them running back and forth through the wilds. They had done little things to add to the homeliness, such as running string lights overhead and had even been growing herbs and a few vegetables in clay pots. It wasn't much, but it was a home. The man struggled to even move his head, so the body was out of the question. So many people here. He's struggling to discern just how many are surrounding him. He can just barely make out Yugen's body nearby, so he knows that he's on a ticking time clock before that man wakes up and outs him as the one who had done the dirty deed at the healing pools. He simply lay there, counting his lucky stars. I'm terrible at this today. As he smelt the needle scent that permeated on the wind. All he can do was enjoy the nature than the remaining time that he has here. In a way, he can feel the Grim Reaper approaching, Yema's own personal attendant. The fire provided warmth, but he knew the cold will soon overtake him if he cannot do anything about solving his lack of health. Home you've made here is lovely. He slowly ambled his way forward toward the fire. Genesis took some time to look around from the standing position here at the center, noting the sparring ring and the training paths with approval. Then he sank carefully to a seat near the fire, across from the cook. The cook gave a friendly nod. He'd heard Koshoro's voice, of course, but there was no need to yell for him. Besides, the heat of the fire felt good, and he appreciated the chance to just soak in relative peace of the camp. But there was some tiny note of unease beneath the surface. Couldn't parse it at all, but something had grated at an inner part of him, the part that judged people, and watched them. As Koshoro was returning with water and a stack of clothes, he saw the figure by the fire. A noble silhouette against the light of the fire. Tamayo stood near Genesis and was trading pleasantries with him, explaining all they had done, the lengths of their training course, and the little additions they had made to make the space more inviting and welcome to all who came to the sanctuary. His heart started to beat faster. He nearly dropped the water container in his hands. Here was the real hero of Pineapple Cove, and he hadn't spoken to him since he had been through all that. It felt like a lifetime ago, and yet, like a war he had been in, no one else could understand. He approached Tamayo, asked her to please bring the articles to Fusion, and slowly sat down next to Genesis with a wide-eyed stare he wished he could wipe away. So, how was your fight with Nova? Was it what he eventually blurted out? Sorry, guys, 1 second. Okay. We're just going to highlight this. See where we're at. Oh, yeah. We're where I thought we were. Tamayo came to Fusion and kneeled down next to his cot. Do you need help changing? We have a capsule house just over there. We're all pretty open here. No need for modesty if it's not your style. She lifted a large container of water and helped press it to Fusion's cracked lips. So what's your name? Fusion had stirred, but sorry. I can't read today. Fusion struggled, but he forced out a nod against his body's wishes. Yes, I need some help. I am Fusion. I remembered. He had hoped that his name would not be one they knew of, but his mind was too cloudy to figure out a new identity right now. He would allow himself to be carried to the capsule house so he can get changed. There was little else he could say. He was the type of guy to be quiet unless asked, when he's not hunting at least. This is one of those rare moments where Fusion got his rest, but he was still unsettled by the situation he found himself in. Genesis turned to face Genesis. I think he meant to say he turned to face Koshoro. He smiled and nodded. It's just about everything I'd hoped for. It's been a while since I had a chance to go all out and beyond. He continued nodding, going back over the fight and snippets in his mind. Some of the memories in his head were muddled, especially towards the end. I think we got eaten by a dinosaur. Yeah, that was weird. He looked around the camp. How do you keep those kind of critters from coming too close to the camp? Seems like they'd be a threat. Tamayo called for Yonda to leave Yugen's side. This human woman... sorry. I'm going to read this before I read it out loud. Okay. This human woman was burled and with strength and easily could lift Fusen up before they both entered the nearby capsule house. In the dark, they removed Fusen's clothes, but they redressed him before they redressed him, they bandaged his wounds, applied alcohol to his cuts. They stitched up parts of him that had been ripped open. I don't know why that took me so long to read. I apologize. I'm giving myself an F for today. This video is becoming a travesty. And they did all these things with careful attendance, as if he was one of their own family. They did this with just love and respect for whatever he had been through. The half-breed Koshoro grinned at Genesis. Saw it from kind of far away. Wish I could have been closer, but I was really scared we might end up in the path of a Kuma Shinrei from her. It was still a real sight. You should be proud. Trust me, I didn't fare nearly as well. He rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Oh, well, we found out pretty early on that there's a certain sense that they don't like. Gojaro, he pointed back towards the cook, found some before I met him, and then Kosharo looked down for a moment. Well, Tia found some too. She's here. She's been through some hard stuff recently, but she'll come out of it. His voice was somber. His body language was one of defeat and regret. I wish we'd caught up after the stuff in Pineapple Cove. You saved the city. You might have even saved the planet. You definitely saved me and Greg back there. You're kind of my hero, you know? Fusen had felt it. Their love. It hit different, for it was something that he lacked in his life. He never had any allies. Sorry. Lost where I was. Okay. He never had any allies. Rather, the ones he had were completely business-based. Fractal and the Shadow Operative only acted due to seeing use in Fusen, but they never really cared for him on an emotional level. These people, unknowingly facing the one who killed their friend, treated him like no one else did, or rather, like no one he remembers did. He was bandaged up, his wounds were healing, and there were new clothes again. He was fresh, but with broken bones. He can move a bit more, but it would take some time before he could move properly. Right now, he only sat with thoughts to himself. Thank you, he said to the helpers. Genesis didn't have to look around to see that there were others reacting when Kosho ducked away from whatever sore topic it was. And from Kosho's reaction, he leaned forward, resting some of his weight on his knees. I kind of ducked out of Pineapple Cove and went looking for somewhere quiet to sit and collect my head. But an old friend hit me up for a favor. Spent a month on Insignia. Nice place. Then he let out a low sigh. Pineapple Cove, huh? I could have saved a lot more people if I'd been ready to fight her sooner. He looked over at Kosho in that last bit. Hero, huh? Didn't expect that one. You'll be back out there in no time, Yonda said, giving him a light pat on the offering her strong arm for Fusen to walk out with. By the time they'd finished redressing him, She'd found her usual bottle of port and was drinking from it. While Tamayo was distracted, she offered it to Fusen with a very serious shh, because she knew very little of the drugs given to him for his pain, and alcohol weren't supposed to be used and mixed. But what was really the harm? Food should be coming up soon. Take a seat by the fire. Make yourself comfortable. Normally Tia would be around to tell stories, but because Vonda was a little sauce and she didn't really have much way of holding back, her boyfriend was murdered. She's been locked up in her room. Even Coco can't get her out for long. She's just heartbroken. We've all been. But we've got to keep going, no matter how much it hurts. You really would have liked her stories, Fusen. Kosho looked at Genesis with a deep stare. He was trying his best to keep his voice down. He really hadn't talked about the cove with any of the tiger lilies. He hadn't talked about it with anyone. But there was one person he could finally ask. I don't know how you beat her. I don't. I've been racking my mind about it. I mean, I fought there. I did everything that I could. I almost died. I think I did die for a second. But you beat her. And I don't... How do you fight through something like that, Genesis? How did you do it? There's some serious trouble here in the sanctuary, and I need to know. Fusen wondered. Her boyfriend was murdered? Could he have been the one to do so? There are many faces that he'd taken around here, but it's difficult putting names or remembering amongst the countless just who survived. Time was ticking, though. Yugen will wake up eventually, and he cannot fight in this state. Before he'd be taken back to the campfire, he looked towards the remaining tatters of his clothing and say something. I need to go through my belongings before I return back. Should he be taken to his pockets? Should he be taken to his pockets, he'd quietly find the cube Fractal had given him, a capsule for the shadow operative equipment, and a detonator for explosive he'd set. The detonator. Yes, he'd set the explosives, but he'd yet to use them. This would cause complete chaos in the outskirts of the sanctuary. Some of the training grounds would be destroyed where the walls are, but the forest would remain untouched. Still, the sound of explosives would echo all throughout. He looks back at Tamayo to see if she's paying attention. I'm not much of a drinker. My condolences to your friend. I guess her stories will have to wait. He pretends to be checking further pockets, but he presses the button and the detonator as he does. So he blows up part of the sanctuary. Wow, I totally skipped over that part. I totally missed that part. Wow. Okay. Genesis quietly looked down at his hands. Where are we at here? Wow, this is already 28 minutes. Genesis quietly looked down at his hands. His right was bandaged, but his left wasn't, and he ran his finger along the deep, straight, horizontal scars of his palm. I don't think I did it alone. I felt something there at the end. Something broke her. Besides that, wasn't much of anything special or unique. She just didn't have the spirit for it. Every time I broke through, though, every time I got closer to her, she'd flinch. He shook his head. I just waited her out. I have to figure you guys managed to find whatever her power source was and broke it. Beck's explanation, an explosion rang out, and his head swiveled. He nearly shot to his feet, then settled back with a slight groan. That wasn't in the camp. A ways away. Should the opportunity present itself while the whole camp was distracted by some sounds of potential chaos, he'd try to make a slip and get away with what he got. He's not staying for Yugen to reveal the truth to them. Their assistance was something to think about, but he's made too many enemies to be able to catch himself, to be able to attach himself to anybody in particular. He must move. Koshoro nodded as Genesis explained what had happened beat by beat, but it wasn't what he really meant to ask. But what gave you the strength to fight that hard? Someone that strong? How do you do As the blast went off, Kosho stood up immediately. He motioned to Yonda. Is it Yonda or Vonda? We'll have to see. And then to Tamayo, and finally Gojaro, and then looked at Genesis. I have to go. You can stay here. Don't worry if you need to leave. Food will be ready soon. Like I said, things here in the sanctuary aren't always what they seem. Sometimes I wonder if even Nova knows what's going on here. He gave a salute, and then began to run off investigating the explosions. Genesis watched Koshoro run off. He wanted to jump off and follow, but no. For now, his body truly did need to mend. He wasn't a fool to run off and overstrain himself and possibly cause further damage. Still, Koshoro seemed to have a lot in his mind. It gave Genesis a lot to think about, too. The strength to fight that hard? How could he answer that? He wasn't sure himself, but he had time to think about it. He could spare more time to wait in the sanctuary, perhaps help, or if what his young friend truly needed was guidance, he could offer that too. Oof. So, that took me way longer than I thought it would to read through. We're already at 30 minutes, and I'm going to try to surmise my review of it. First of all, false advertising. Actually, it doesn't say that Yugen was here. Never mind. I thought Yugen was involved in this, but he was just out in just a set piece. I mean, of course, everything that's being done with the Tiger Lilies is very home-based setting. I like the camp that they have set up. The one thing that I pointed to earlier when I was reading is, like I said in the previous video about Fusen, it really does seem like he doesn't know what's going on. And it's like getting knocked out knocked the possession out of him. And he's still him. He still has his goal. He still wants to, be the baddie. But I think he's more like a conduit here. I really, if I had to say it, he is something that whatever entity is pushing him to do this, they have similar goals, and that's what connected the two of them, and that's why he is being used this way. But definitely, now that we see him and we kind of see him waking up and talking, and we get a little bit more about his past, it definitely makes more sense. And for everybody else, I mean, it was just a nice recovery, right? Genesis is kind of remembering his fight, and he kind of he hoped that he had done enough damage to knock the Super Saiyan out next to him, and Kosho's kind of like, yeah, sorry buddy, that wasn't that way. But it was really cute to see how Koshoro is the one that's smitten by Genesis. I think that bit by Tamayo, I understand why it was there, but Ko's really the one who kind of has a crush on him. Are you coming to see me? I'll be done soon. Are you coming to see me? You want to come say hi? Hi, come here. Come here.
Hi.
Hi. We have a...
Hi.
Hi. All right. So we're going to finish this with the baby in her hand because she wants to go outside. But yeah, Ko is really... meeting his hero. Oh, you want to get down now? Okay, bye-bye. Go get ready with mommy. Daddy be out soon. Hi. So yeah, it's a good log. This is a good recovery log. The explosions at the end, I feel were a bit much. I honestly don't think that Fusen needed to do that. Given the way that this was set up, it's obviously it's more drama and everything like that, but I feel like he could have just been like, hey, thanks for healing me. I gotta go. Because nobody was like detaining him. Nobody was kind of saying like, you've got to sit here and you're going to answer these questions, right? He was just like, hey, like we helped you. There's food here. And he can be like, no, I'm good. Thanks for waking me up. I was just out there sparring, and I, got lost and fell, and somebody put me in the healing pools, and whatever happened there, like I managed to get away. He had just lied his way through it. I don't really feel like he needed to blow up part of the sanctuary. But again, it's more drama. It's more, it's more exciting that way. But yeah, I mean, again, this is just a good recovery log, talking about Tia and kind of like alluding to, like, my friend's boyfriend was murdered, and the fact that the murderer is right there and that's the person that they're talking to, very, Death Note kind of vibes, right? Like, yeah, we're trying to find this murderer. Can you help us? It's like, I can't help you find me, but sure. So anyway, guys, I'm not going to take more of your time. This has been a 36-minute video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Again, and always, thank you for your time, and I will see you guys next time.